Now, for the weed connoisseur that visits Colombia or Medellin, it ain't the same, guys. It ain't the same. You need to hear this story. Anybody hands you a pre-roll, you need to be aware. So check this story out. Caution. Experts warn cannabis is more toxic today than it was a decade ago. Science demonstrates the consequences that consuming cannabinoids during adolescence has on the brain. The Mexican state of Sinaloa is the setting for a bloody gird lord stories that characterize the Mexican corridor Mexico genre. It's also where a savvy gird trafficker, Rafael Caro, invented a cannabis cultivation technique in the late 1970s that made him a millionaire. Since then, plantations have increasingly proven highly effective at increasing the THC content of marijuana, thus making it more profitable. We're referring to its psychoactive compound, tetrahydrocannabinol, responsible for the feeling of being high, but also for undesirable side effects on the brain, especially when consumption begins at adolescence, addiction, psychotic disorders, and cognitive impairment, among others. All the energy the plant would otherwise dedicate to seed production is used to generate more resin, and therefore seeds have a higher THC content. Fernando Barantero, a researcher at the Faculty of Experimental Sciences at Francisco Victoria University and director of the Neurobiology of Addictive and Anxiety Disorders Research Group, explains specifically the amount of THC in the cannabis sativa varieties consumed today has tripled in the last decade. This clearly means that its consumption is more dangerous than it was 20 or 30 years ago. If the average proportion of THC in marijuana consumed in the streets was 4% back then, today it's 70% or more. This change, which has taken place in just a handful of years, is responsible for the low social perception of the risk of cannabis. Parents and grandparents of young people who use this GERD today are mistaken when they believe it's the same as joints they smoked in their home. On the contrary, they have nothing to do with it. To give you an idea, before the 1990s, the THC concentration in marijuana buds was less than 2%, down from 1% during the hippie wave of the 1970s. In the 1990s, it rose to 4%, and since then it has increased by 212%, according to a study by the University of Colorado. Some strains have up to 35%. THC binds directly to CB1 cannabinoid receptors, which are widely distributed through the brain and neuronal structures that mediate important functions. That's why it produces so many different effects, says Barandero, who specializes in studies of this laboratory. The risk increased depending on the age, dose, or amount of THC and the duration of abuse.